This is Scott Becker with the Becker Business Minute Podcast, the Becker Private Equity Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. These are 14 stories that we're following today. It's today's February 8th, 2023, the week of February 8th, 2023. Here we go. First, the markets surged yesterday. That was February 7th after Chairman Powell gave comments that sort of reduced the concern that he would hike rates aggressively after a very good January jobs report. So in January, there are 517,000 jobs created, way more than expected. There's been market concern that would lead Chairman Powell, Jerome Powell, to be more aggressive in raising rates. He sort of dissuaded that notion yesterday, and the markets went up, 1 to 2% yesterday. Second, today the markets point down a little bit, looking to give back some of those gains. Third, eBay announced that they're laying off 500 people, trying to get back to profitability or greater profitability. Fourth, Zoom itself, which is a highly profitable company, announced that it's laying off 1,300 people, or 15% of its workforce. Overall, it's a very profitable company. Its next earnings call is February 27th. The stock jumped nearly 10% yesterday on the news of them cutting headcount. Its stock was down about 40% over the last year. Fifth, Chipotle reported great overall results but missed their estimates. Its stock fell 6% this morning, and pre-market income was up year over year by 68%. So quarterly income rose to $223 million. Revenues were also up 11%, but the earnings per share missed estimates, and that's what drove the stock price down. They basically talked about higher same-store sales, that's good, higher labor costs, that's bad, and higher prices to make things work. Sixth, President Biden in the State of the Union address talked about many different things. One of them was taxing and discouraging share buybacks. Of course, from our perspective, that doesn't really make economic sense one way or the other. It's just a choice of companies as to how to use their capital. Yes, it doesn't grow the company particularly, but it might grow the value of the company to the existing shareholders. Not really an economic argument, in my perspective, for taxing share buybacks or putting a special tax on that, other than just to raise money. Seventh, one theme of one of our podcasts today will be the need to recover, rest, and sharpen the saw, whether business, personally, or otherwise, but so important for companies and individuals. That'll be on a separate podcast, recovery, rest, and sharpening the saw. Sharpening the saw is a term that Stephen Covey used to use, but we'll talk about it in a separate podcast. Eighth, Microsoft duking it out with sort of Google to try and get better in search results, and the ad business comes from search results. It's relaunching its Bing search engine with enhanced AI capabilities, is what it's saying. Sort of reminds me of Apollo Creed and Rocky fighting it out, two of the most valuable companies in America. Microsoft, I think, generally second in market capitalization after Apple, right up there. Google also in the top 5 to top 10. So we'll see how that goes. Ninth, Bed Bath & Beyond dropped 48% yesterday. This has been up and down like a meme stock recently. It dropped basically yesterday in the announcement that they're going to raise $1 billion to try and keep the company moving in the right direction, or get it moving in the right direction. That's going to seriously dilute current, the current shareholders, the current equity base. 10th, Bitcoin stable at about 23,165. Amazing how this has bounced back after this sort of debacle that was FTX and SBF and Sam Bankman-Fried and everything else, and the exchanges falling apart. But Bitcoin stabilizing. It's up about 35-40% this year so far. 11th, the 10-year Treasury yield rises to 3.67%. The 1-year rises to 4.89%. Those are serious numbers for investors, for people trying to put their money into safe places. 12th, oil's about $78 a barrel. Again, a healthy number, but not nearly the excess high numbers that we saw last year. Finally, 13, and I'll talk about 14 in a second. Another thing we're going to talk about today in companies, individuals, businesses, is this need to layer new goals, new passions to keep business and life interesting. It's not just about the money. It's about keeping it engaging and interesting and exciting. And as a company, as a business, as a person, finding those passions. And we'll talk about that again in a separate podcast. 14th, finally, we've got great guests today on the Becker's Healthcare podcast. Kristen McDermott-Woodrum, Anuj Mehta of Curewell Health, Greg Leiss of the Fulton County Medical Center, Jacob Emerson of Becker's Healthcare, Peter Papadakos, brilliant physician, University of Rochester Regional Medical Center, and Jamie Murillo, Dr. Murillo of United Healthcare. So great speakers today. Thank you very much for listening to the Becker Business Minute, the Becker Private Equity Podcast. This is sort of a sample for listeners of what we release every day on Becker Business Minute, Becker Private Equity Podcast. We hope you enjoy it. We hope you subscribe as well. If you're the first person to text me that you heard this all the way through, send me a note at 773-766-5322, and we'll send you a $50 Amazon gift certificate. Again, just for the first person that sends me a note and text me. Thank you for listening to the Becker Business Minute Podcast, the Becker Private Equity Podcast.